Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Let's Talk About It, episode two of Focus Press. And the first thing I think that we should talk about, guys, is now we shot our first episode before we had emailed everybody, and I'm going to explain that email. I explained that email in the first episode that they didn't respond. And so I thought that just for a quick second, guys, I just want your reaction. They did not respond. What do you think about that? Do you just your feelings about that?
Me,
Andy, you go.
I'm not really surprised. Um, just based on another video I saw from them, there's not like this. They don't seem to have this conception that when you put something out on the internet, that you need to back it up, especially when you're attacking a people group. You're actually discounting all of Israel, saying that Israel's done, and there's no concept that, hey, someone may actually challenge this, and I should be ready to give an answer to it. It just, to me, came across like it was beneath them to respond.
And
Yeah,
Andy?
I think I agree with Andy. What I've found amongst Christianity, um, or Christian influencers, for lack of a better word, or people who preach or post stuff, is that they're more than happy to engage with neutral to positive feedback. There is an acceptance of that. They're glad to interact with that. But and I wouldn't even use a strong negative word as like challenging, just questions that might be difficult or poke holes or are more curious, isn't really appreciated. And I always find it so funny that you go onto the internet and you publicly share this opinion of yours and you are then either frustrated or ignore or completely feel offended if someone disagrees with your opinion, which you felt compelled to share to the general public. So it's always this double standard where they're more than happy to accept praise, accept any kind of positive feedback, but when it's negative, you are either a bully or you are, as the kids will say, a hater, or anything like that. And so it's sad to kind of see it in a Christian circle, but I'd also be lying to say it isn't common
Yeah.
um, out there. So yeah, I think basically if we summarize, I'm saying the exact same thing Andy's saying, which is we've seen it countless times, and so it's not surprising.
Yeah, I think I would echo that. Disappointed, but not surprised.
Yeah.
We think that, well, kind of like what I said, that when like we should have an answer ready, like as Paul says, like have an answer ready for the hope that we believe in, and it just begs the questions like when you say things publicly, like do you really put your money where your mouth is? Like, do you really stand on to the things that you believe? And so,
Yeah.
and especially when it's not been like we haven't been belittling to them. We haven't called them names. We haven't insulted them. We've just all we've asked
Mm.
is for them to come on our show and defend the things that they believe, and for them to think that it's acceptable to not respond and to not defend the things that they believe. It's unacceptable.
Yeah.
Absolutely
Yeah.
unacceptable. All right,
Yeah.
guys, we got a lot that we got to get into, so let's go ahead and we are reacting today to. Well, Andy, what are we reacting to today? Can you give us the subject?
Well, I think we're still reacting a bit to the same video as before. There were statements made about how God has no intention of rebuilding the temple. And there's also an article that Wilkie put out there. Why we misunderstand, well, what it's called, we have to stop misreading Revelation. And
Yeah.
he repeats some of the same things that, hey, we we need to stop putting Israel into the equation. That it's all about the church now.
Okay, let me
Uh,
go ahead
Yeah.
and pull that article up for the audience. Okay, guys, so this is the article called "We Have to Stop Misreading Revelation." It's written by Jack Wilkie of Focus Press, also the author of Church Reset. So already from the beginning, it gets very well. Let's just read it. Let me just read the beginning. Okay, so we have to stop misreading Revelation. It's not as hard as you think. Revelation is one of the most difficult, detailed books in the entire Bible. I'm not telling you anything you don't know there. However, I do believe the main theme is easier to interpret than you'd think. And I believe getting it right is of critical importance. So that's just how it starts. Okay? It's not as hard as you think. And then he contradicts himself and says it's one of the most difficult detailed books in the entire Bible. So already it's just a very silly contradiction. I don't think he's really thinking very much about like how he's coming across. It's like those are very two different things. It's very easy to read to understand the theme, but then it's a very difficult book to read. I don't understand how
Yeah.
you come to that conclusion. Okay,
well, I
so
agree. You know
go
what,
ahead.
Caleb? I'm going to be honest. I agree with both of those statements.
Really?
Yeah, I do. I actually agree with both of the. There are certain things in Revelation that are very easy for me to understand. The first three chapters are very easy to understand.
Oh yeah, they're very easy. Yeah.
Okay,
There
yeah,
are
that's fair. That's fair.
there
Those
there are
three chapters.
certain do's and don'ts in there that are crystal clear. And I know if I can learn one thing from those, if I actually keep the law as it applies to me, whatever Revelation 4 and on looks like, it's going to work out better for me than if I don't keep the law as it as it applies to me. Uh,
And would you say then, just to kind of, I mean, it's easy to understand Revelation with your perspective in Judaism, but it starts getting difficult if I use a Christian perspective to understand Revelation. Would you say that's a kind of fair interpretation
yeah,
of that?
that is a very fair interpretation. I'm actually going to bring
Yeah.
in some Jewish language into this later, but I know one thing also that's very easy to understand. The Antichrist is called the man of lawlessness, the man of Torahlessness.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
one thing I don't want to hear from the Antichrist when he shows up is, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant. You feast days, you put it into to say, you argued against the sacrifices that God instituted. You did everything I wanted you to do." I don't want to hear that from the
Mm,
Antichrist. I want to hear that from the true Messiah.
Yep.
mm.
Yep.
You know,
Absolutely. Okay, let me go ahead and continue reading this. So, okay, so here's Jack or Wilkie's basic drive of this article. There are two major misreadings which drive disastrous application. The first is dispensational premillennialism. Dispensational premillennialists believe God operates in different dispensations of history, and we are currently in the church's dispensation. However, they believe this is merely a temporary stopgap dispensation before God returns to prioritizing the people of Israel as his chosen family near the end of the world. Some even teach the church was a hastily constructed plan B developed when Jesus came to earth and found his people weren't ready to receive him as king. So they read Revelation almost entirely as depicting things yet to come, and all of the vivid imagery as potentially having to do with the latest major attention grabbing headlines. For this reason, every major war, economic downturn, solar event, and viral illness is cause for the speculation as to whether it's what Revelation was talking about. And most pressingly, at this moment, it keeps all eyes on Israel as their restoration is the final plan that sees its fulfillment at the end of the book of Revelation. The claim is that God's plan will culminate in the rebuilding of the temple and the restoration of its priestly service, and God is keeping score of which nations support Israel and which ones don't as an extension of the promise to Abraham. So, the US can help set the stage for Christ's return by involving itself in Israel's military conflicts. Okay, so what do you guys think so far?
So there's some things that I can agree with. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm I'm a former primo I'm a former dispensationalist myself. Um, Basically, my eschatology went, okay, there was Israel's time in the Tanakh in the Old Testament. Then Jesus came and in Acts chapter 2 started something called the church age.
Hmm.
And there would be a rapture that would take the church away. And then God would go, oh, yeah, Israel, and go back to focusing on Israel again.
Mm.
And then the church comes back and we're all one happy family. Um, what, why I realized that doesn't work is because there isn't any such thing as a universal church in all of Scripture.
Yeah.
The bride is not the church. The bride is Israel, always has been, always will be. So that
Yeah.
threw my dispensational eschatology out the window. It was a house of cards and it fell down. So I had to redefine it. So I do agree with him on dispensationalism. I also agree with him on historicism. He actually attacks historicism, which is kind of strange because preterism kind of is a branch of historicism itself, and he gets into his viewpoint is partial preterism, which is a form of historicism. So that's a little bit confusing. But notice how in that last paragraph he's starting to like turn on Israel and how the United States really shouldn't be supporting Israel and getting involved in Israel's conflicts.
I will say that one of the things, as also a firmer belief in this, like there's these different dispensations, the Jewish outlook for me, because correct me if I'm wrong, the basic idea is like they were the nations, and then God worked in the patriarchs, and then they were the judges, and then there were the kings, and then it was the priests, and now it's the church age. That's the thing. And for me, I used to believe this, but once you look at the outlook and you look at this, I think the biggest group, I'm saying a lot, but the biggest part of the Bible that kind of clears this all up, which I think a lot of Christians don't spend a lot of time are the prophets. Because when
Yeah.
you read the prophets, it's not as if God was like, okay, I'm working with the patriarchs and then I am going to change my mind and then work with the judges and then I'm going to change my mind and then I'm going to work with the kings. God was very clear that it was the time of the nations. We divorced God and then he's started his rescue plan. The patriarchs are obviously the leadership, but a nation isn't born in a day, nor in a generation. So the patriarchs are part of that development stage to lead up to the nation state of Israel that we see with Moses. And also remember that the king was never a part of the plan. But you can read already in Jacob's prophecy, all the way even to to Moses, that God kind of created this kind of contingency for if a king was going to be used or installed. Because Moses already talks about it in Deuteronomy. Jacob talks about it with Judah in his prophecy against Judah. So it kind of simplifies and puts these history and development of the covenants in these neat little Christian boxes, but it doesn't fit like that. There are things God planned to do that didn't work out, not because God was like, oh, this plan doesn't work out, it's because, well, they messed this up and I need to now kind of bring in my contingency plan. Or what as you guys already know, the Levites weren't supposed to be the priests. It was supposed to be the firstborn son of each Israelite um, to become, but then the sin of the golden calf happens. And so it's not a dispensationalism, it's this development of history. It's this messy, human a human led, but God inspired development of the covenants of Israel, getting up to the point of David as king. And it's not as if the priests are always involved. It's there in prophecy. The king needs to return. There needs Israel is supposed to be a kingdom, and it's supposed to be a absolute monarchy. And there's no change. God doesn't change his mind. It's like, okay, now I'm working with the Levites. No, there's a gap. The prophecies are very clear about this. Um, so already
Yeah.
for me, dispensationalism on that premise, besides if we go to even the church age, which Andy, you perfectly clear up that there is no church age, it's still Israel. There is no dispensationalism. It's Genesis 1. I like how Rabbi divides it. Genesis 1 to, I think, when is it Abraham's call? I think it's in Genesis 10, if I'm not good.
12, I think.
12, just a 12.
12, yeah. So Genesis 1 to 11, the history of the world before the Jews. And then Genesis 12 to the end of Genesis, I think Genesis 50, which is the creation of the Jews. And then the history of the world with Jews. If you want your dispensationalism, there's only three.
Yeah. All right, let's keep going, guys. All right, so here's the second point. The second is historicism, the Roman reading. This one was pretty interesting. The historicist views Rome as the main antagonist of Revelation. David Lipscomb and many others have extrapolated from this perceived conflict that Rome is a symbol of empire and government that extends to today's empires and governments, such as America. For this reason, the church should never and will never have power. The church is to remain the perpetual underdog and must always eschew societal political influence, for that would be aligning ourselves with Babylon. Because of this, Christians should not be involved with politics and should have no expectation that governments will be obedient to Christ. In fact, if they do, it is a bad thing, as earthly power and the gospel are never to be mixed. I thought that was now. I say that I'm intrigued from obviously not coming within Christianity. I'm kind of intrigued from like, oh, interesting, another what do you call it, schism that's happening here. Um,
Yeah.
I think that I have no problem with Christians or anybody, I guess Messianic Jews or Gentiles being in power. It's kind of an interesting, I guess, slant that this schism has. So I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I agree. I don't like generally think that the church should have power at all because scripturally it doesn't exist and hasn't been given any.
Hmm.
Mm.
God is
Mm.
the authority, and we're told whatever our government authorities are that we should respect them. That's in Romans, right? We should respect any authority that we're under. Um, but the thing that catches my, he said the historicist views Rome as the main antagonist of Revelation. Strangely enough, preterism, it has, you wouldn't know it today, but it has its beginnings in Jesuit Catholicism. Uh, a guy by the name, a Jesuit theologian by the name of Louis de Alcazar in the 1600s, early 1600s. Matter of fact, 1614, he wrote a book. This is part of the Counter-Reformation. Um,
Mhm.
that they had this problem. The many people in the Reformation were calling the Pope the Antichrist. So a cool way to solve that, so where Rome does not get to be the bad guy anymore, is to say, well, all this has already happened. All the prophecy in the Bible is already fulfilled. So the
Mm.
Pope can't be the Antichrist because all that has happened. Nero was the Antichrist, and we can just do away with all that stuff. And now, strangely enough, today we have a lot of Protestants that hold to some sort of preterist view when the view was actually designed to refute them and to begin with. And the reason for that today is because um, I guess the preterist outlook excludes Israel. And that's very popular right now amongst all of Christianity. A lot of Christianity, like, let's make it about the church. Let's make it not about Israel. So now it resonates, especially with groups like the Church of Christ.
Mm.
Yeah.
The Church of
S-
Christ, when it
s-
was founded, picked up on it almost immediately, from what I understand.
Yeah.
So would that be, I guess, where he's leading this article, where I guess Caleb will read the last part, is that's the view, that's the origin of that view, with the Catholic trying to argue back why, because I understand why that would be an argument, because Rome is an enemy a lot in what is called the New Testament. Rome is a big problem, and it definitely, if you read the Apostles, it's definitely becomes the fill-in or the successor to empires like Babylon and Persia and stuff like that. So now, when you have this new movement that claims to be, the Pope, the Bishop of Rome, and all of that, it starts to become problematic. Because in Genesis 15, it's very clear that the authority is still in Jerusalem. The apostles still meet in Jerusalem. But I'm
Well,
gonna
not according to
save
Jack
that.
Wilkie.
No,
So
not
Yeah,
we, we
yeah, that's
should.
what I was about to say. I
So
was
let's go
like,
ahead and read
Caleb, you
this.
you go ahead and read that.
So the partial preterist is the position that Jack Wilkie is presenting. Reading clears up these misunderstandings. This view sees Jerusalem, and especially the scribes, Pharisees, and chief priests, as the antagonist defeated in Revelation, an event that occurred with the destruction of Jerusalem and her temple at 70 AD. With this view in mind, most of the events of Revelation are in the past. Christ is definitely not concerned with restoring the temple, as he is the one who destroyed it. And the kingdoms of this world are not his sworn enemies, but rather his subjects. Why choose this reading? I'm not going to break down all the complex details of the book here, obviously. Though, if you're interested in further study, audio from the class my brother and I are teaching on Revelation is up for Focus Plus subscribers. I should go get Focus Plus. I'm curious about that audio. We should, we might
Yeah,
have to listen to that. Anyways,
I'm very curious, but yeah.
you can just tell me,
instead,
guys.
okay. Instead, I'm going to hit a few quick high notes. Actually, I don't even want to read that yet. Whew, that was there was a couple of moments I felt like I was really close to vomiting. But anyways, I'm gonna hold
Yeah,
that
that
back. Let you guys respond to that.
I'm gonna hold my thoughts until we get on the coming with the clouds in Matthew 24, because
Okay.
I think I can sum it
have
all.
a, I have a,
Um,
I have a few thoughts, and I guess they damning thoughts. Um, with the view in mind, most of events of I'm just reading the second paragraph. The view events of Revelations are in the past. Christ is definitely not concerned with restoring the temple, as he is the one to destroy it. Now, if he's talking about Jesus, if you say that, if you read that line to the apostles, and if you read that to most Jews, I don't think there's a better description to say, oh, so Jesus is the anti-Messiah, basically. Like that is prophetically the anti-Messiah figure, that he is not concerned about rebuilding the temple. In fact, he wants to destroy it. Nothing disqualifies Jesus more than having that perspective. And I mean, really, again, even on the first one, the view sees Jerusalem, especially the scribes, Pharisees, and chief priests, as the antagonist defeated in Revelation. Again, that disqualifies not only Jesus but Paul, who are very proud and active Pharisees. They hold Pharisaical views themselves and promote it. Um, stuff like resurrection of the dead is a good example of that. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's really, really, but I think those two statements, that Jerusalem and the Pharisees are the enemy, that disqualifies the Jerusalem Council that has James and Peter in them. This is my question again. If this is true, why in the world would Peter, James, and Paul even waste their time being setting up the headquarters of the Jesus movement in this apparent evil city,
Andrew.
in Jerusalem? Why would they waste why would the angel that tells them that the same way that Jesus left is going to be the same way he returns when they're in Jerusalem? Um, in this,
Well,
there's just so many holes.
look at this. So look at all these things. So it sees Jerusalem. Who is in Jerusalem? Jews. And the scribes, Pharisees, and chief priests. Who are those people? Those are Jews. This is a very
Mm,
Jew-centric idea of making Jews the antagonists of the Bible. I mean, this is loaded with anti-Semitic uh, doctrine.
unfortunately, yeah. That really, if I say Washington is the root of all evil, and I know some Americans might even agree with that, but if I say Washington, if I
Some
say
of them will be like, "Well, they
Washington,
are."
if I'm saying that as a foreigner, that is a placeholder for all that encompasses American leadership and culture.
Yeah,
If I say
the political
Pretoria,
hub.
which is, if I say Pretoria is, you know, the root of all evil and nothing good, I am talking about South Africa's leadership and government and headship. That is a damning statement. It is talking about the head of the whole body, which is the nation that it comes from. So,
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, we should move on. I don't know if Andy wants to add anything from
I'm
there.
biting my tongue. I'm chomping at the bit to get into Matthew 24. We're gonna like take care of all of this, really. Okay. Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, he's about to mention Matthew 24, so let's go on. Coming on the clouds, like the Gospels, Revelation points to Daniel 7, 13 and 14, in which the Son of Man is depicted as coming on the clouds. Jesus quoted that verse in Matthew 24:30 and said that generation wouldn't pass away until it took place. Jesus also told the high priest he would behold the same thing, and Revelation 1:7 says Jesus would be seen on the clouds by even those who pierced him. But he hasn't come on the clouds yet, you might point out. That's only true if Daniel wrote of Christ's final return. In Daniel 7, the Son of Man's coming on the clouds is his ascension to the throne of the Ancient of Days to receive a kingdom. In those verses, he goes up, not down. Revelation goes on to detail all that occurred in heaven, the starting with the ascension on to the final confirmation of his rule at the temple's destruction. All right, Andy, you're chomping like a hungry hippo. What's
Yeah,
what's going on?
I am. So one thing he's kind of correct on Daniel 7 from the way I understand it. In Daniel 7, Jesus is coming in the heavens on the clouds. But remember in Acts that the apostles are all standing up and looking up in the air, and the angels tell them the same Jesus would return to you in the same way that he left. He's going to come back on the clouds. He left on the clouds. He's going to come back on the clouds. He left from the Mount of Olives. He's going to come back to the Mount of Olives. But let's jump into Matthew 24. He's conflating a lot of ideas here. He's conflating a lot of things. Okay, I'm just going to start at the top of the chapter, Genesis 24. Jesus left the temple and was going away when his disciples came to point out, and his disciples came to point out to him the buildings of the temple. But he answered them, "You see all these, do you not? Surely I say to you, there will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down." So this is obviously about 70 AD. I mean, so far,
Yeah,
it gets the point. This is definitely. And he sat on the Mount of Olives. He's not teaching this by accident, guys. He's on the Mount of Olives. The disciples came to him privately saying, "Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming at the end of the age?" Those are two different questions, and they get two different answers. One is, tell us when these things will be. That's just, when will the temple be destroyed? When is that going to happen? The second thing is a different story altogether. What will be the
yeah,
coming in the end of the age? And you have to rightly divide this as to when Jesus is talking about what. Okay, so he starts off answering the first question. And this is about 80, 70, the following verses. Jesus answered them and says, "See, that no one leads you astray. For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and they will lead many astray. There was a guy named Bar Kokhba that
I was
wrote,
about to mention, yeah.
he did the same, he did that, right? Uh, and you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place, but the end is not yet. Okay, he's saying don't conflate these ideas, guys. The end is not yet.
Mm,
And then he says, for nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All of these are but the beginning of birth pains. The birth pain thing is not foreign to them. They already are aware of this Hebrew phrase, Heble Mashiach, birth pains of the Messiah. This was spoken of in Judaism already by this time. This is already a preconceived notion that they have. And the sages debated this quite a bit. Like one sage in, I think it's Sanhedrin 98, somewhere that he says, I hope that the Messiah comes after I die. After I die, I want the Messiah to come. I want the Messiah to come after I die because these times are going to get bad. And another rabbi, sage tops him and says, "Well, bring it on. I'll be willing to sit in the feces of his donkey if I have to, just to be part of it." And some of them debate maybe we can relieve some of the symptoms if we make sure we're diligent in studying Torah and doing acts of kindness. That part I believe Jesus would disagree with because he's saying like, you're going to suffer, things are going to happen. But the wars and rumors of war, they're kind of like what I would say, like if a woman goes in labor, sometimes you have like the Braxton Hicks contractions. They're kind of like false labor, false contractions. They remind you that the baby's coming, but they don't mean the baby's coming now,
mm,
right?
mm.
And contractions as they come, they get closer and closer and closer. So with like many Bible prophecies, Jesus is going into something that's cyclical and it's going to happen over and over and over and over again. 80/70 is part of what he's talking about, but it's not the ultimate fulfillment of things. And I think we talked about this, touched on this in the last episode, but Christians struggle with that word fulfill and what it means. They always seem to think that fulfill means to end when it really means to live out and to live through. Jesus didn't say, I didn't come to end the law and the prophets. I came to end it, like fulfill it, but I mean to end it. That would make no sense whatsoever. He goes, no, I came to live it out. I came to see it go through. So when
Mm.
you have birth pains, you have things that are coming at intervals over and over and over and over again. That's the Jewish idea behind this. It's, these are never one and done kind of things. Okay, so continuing verse 9, chapter 24. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and put you to death, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And then many will fall away and betray one another and hate one another. And many false prophets will rise and lead many astray. And because, what's that next word, guys? And because what?
Lawlessness.
Lawlessness will be increased, the love of God will grow, the love of many will grow cold. But the one who endures to the end will be saved. And the gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as the testimony to all nations. And then the end will come. So, did that happen? Was he telling the apostles that was going to happen to them? Yes. Around 70 AD, after 70 AD, yes. Will that happen to believers in the future? Yes. But the question is this about
That's
80, 70 or about the future? The answer is yes.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. Um,
It's interesting you say that because if you're reading what Jesus is saying right now, all right, especially in terms of lawlessness and rumors of war and all of that, and I guess verse 15 is onwards is a bit. People think that there was one Hanukkah, but there's been two, and there's going to be a third one. Talking about that cycle that you're talking about, that birth pains, it's always been happening throughout Jewish history. even though, okay, Jesus is the ultimate Messiah of Israel, but there have been other Messiahs of Israel throughout history. And even in these Messiahs' lives, and when they've come and saved Israel, there have been birth pains around them. Look at Moses,
It might be good to
one of the first
clarify
Messiahs.
what do you mean by messiahs of Israel? Because I can imagine there'd be comments that are like, "Oh my goodness, he just said there's
King.
multiple
Sure, sure.
messiahs. What is this guy talking about?"
Yeah, we need to talk about what the word Messiah means. There's a the Messiah, and there are like smaller messiahs. Like Mashiach is a term that was used for King David.
Okay,
Now, but there's one greater than King David, right? Um,
Yeah,
I hope
yeah.
yeah,
so.
Jesus is much greater. So we need to make sure that there's not this idea of like, okay, yeah, we got so many of them coming. No, there's Jesus.
No,
Jesus is the Messiah of Messiahs, you could say, the King of Kings.
yeah,
Okay, all right.
You're
yeah,
saying Andy
yeah.
Stanley is not a messiah?
Maybe an anti one, but that's a different story. But
Uh,
yeah, so Jesus, I think it's very important. I like that question, Caleb, because Jesus doesn't come and start something new. He isn't a lot of the roles that he fills are roles that have been filled at lesser degrees before he came in. Jesus isn't the son of Jesus, he's the son of David. That's specifically a Jewish idea. There's even we could even say like the first ever Messiah, and using strictly now, one of the things I think we all Christians forget is that one of the characteristics, one of the main things a Messiah does, anointed one, is that they do a mission to relieve or save Israel. Before anything else, not that
gotcha.
Messiah doesn't come for the world, but if he comes, and so if you look at the history, one of the first
So kind of like
ideas of
Winston
Messiah is that
Churchill, you could say is like a kind of a. I mean, it's obviously not a Jewish nation, but you could kind of loosely use that metaphor to say like he was kind of the savior, Messiah for like the United Kingdom, like kind of like that, right?
exactly,
Okay,
and and
okay,
and and in Winston Churchill saving England, his heroics, his dedication, his bravery, and his leadership benefited the world in general also.
yeah,
He obviously had the intention of protecting England, but through his leadership and his working with the Americans, bringing the Americans in to the war and, dealing with the Soviets, he also influences protecting or with the greater Western world. Now, that's the same thing when you look at someone, I would say like one of the first Messiah figures before even Israel is a nation, when it's still a family, is Joseph, son of Jacob. He goes to Egypt, and through his administration and through his dreams, he not only saves Egypt, but he saves Israel. Israel gets saved through Joseph. And is it any wonder that when the sages and the prophet and the rabbis look to the Messiah figure, they see a son of David and a son of Joseph um, in that. So that's what I mean when I see there's been Joseph, and then there's always David, and again, just to kind of touch back to why I say it would be a disqualifying figure for the Christ, for the Messiah to hate the temple. One of the reasons why David is called, there's many factors what David did to qualify as a Messiah for his people. There's the idea that obviously he defeated Israel's enemies and subdued them. He finishes up Joshua's role of destroying the Nephilim around the area and subduing them. He's very instrumental in that. But one main thing is the reason David is called a man after God's own heart is that while he's in his palace, in his kingdom, and God has subdued all his enemies, he remembers that God is sitting in a tent while the whole of Israel is in the promised land. And he is the one that inspires and starts the building and the blueprints for God's temple. That is why David is called the man after God's own heart. It's because he had a heart to build the temple. That would disqualify anyone who has the opposite approach to the temple.
Exactly. That's good.
Um,
That's well said.
and so, yeah, but Andy, you can carry on. I think that was kind of about that cycle idea that's going on, that there was a Hanukkah, which obviously creates the political foundations of where Jesus is born in. But there was a second one in 70 AD. You know what I mean? And there will be a third one later on, which Jesus will be very influential later on with that, redeeming that situation.
Well, for the sake of time, I'm not going to read everything in Matthew 24. I'm going to just hit some highlights of it. But Jesus
Let's do
talks
that.
about,
We're wrapping up on our episode. We're already about probably 15 minutes, so I might have to cut some things, but let's go ahead.
okay. So anyway, Jesus talks about the abomination of desolation. That's happens over and over. It happened before in like the Hanukkah, before Hanukkah, like Antiochus Epiphanes. He set up a statue of Zeus in the temple. It happened after AD 70. There was a monument to Zeus put up on the Temple Mount. And I believe it'll happen again in the future. This is another, these are cycles. And he talks again about the false prophets and things that come up in 29, immediately after the tribulation of those days. The sun will be darkened. That didn't happen in AD 70, guys. The sun didn't go out, the moon didn't quit giving us light, and the stars didn't fall from heaven. That did not happen in AD 70.
Yeah.
Another problem is that there's so many other prophecies that have gaps. Rome was one nation that came against Israel at this time, and Rome won. Rome actually beat it. Zechariah 14, all the nations come against Israel, and they do not win. There's multiple nations come against Israel. They do not win. Actually, matter of fact, Jesus returns on the clouds to the Mount of Olives in Zechariah 14. He destroys the nations that are fighting against Israel. Take note, preterism. Jesus destroys those guys. And then what happens? Out of the survivors of those nations, Jesus says, I want you all to come to Sukkot and I want you to offer sacrifices. Where would the sacrifices be happening if there's not going to be a temple rebuilt?
Yep.
It,
It's a
it,
good question.
when in 70 AD did he set his foot down on the Mount of Olives and split it into two pieces?
Mm.
So one last slide I wanted to leave you, Caleb, if you could put that up.
Yeah, as long
Yes.
as you don't call me Caitlin, it's all good.
Here, sorry, I mean, I don't know what this, but anyway, it's in Jeremiah chapter 33. There's this
Yeah.
selective reading that everybody does. They filter some things out, and I put some in blue and I put some in green. And the part,
Oh, that picture.
yes, and the parts that I put in green are the types that people do not see. Jeremiah 33, 14 through 18. Behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will fulfill my promise I made to who?
Israel
House of
and
Israel.
the house of Judah.
To the Doobie Brothers?
And then, and then the blue part Christians can see. You know, they'll see this. In those days and at that night, I'll cause a righteous branch to spring up for David, and he'll execute justice and righteousness in the land. That's Jesus. I see that. Yeah, cool, cool, great, great. Let me skip over the screen part. I don't quite see that. In those days, Judah will be saved, and Jerusalem will dwell securely.
Oh no, Andy, that sounds
Not,
terrible.
not be destroyed, but dwell securely. Well, here's the blue part. We're good. We're the blue part, guys. Here's the blue part. This is the name by which it will be called. The Lord is our righteousness. That's Jesus again. For thus says the Lord, David shall never lack a man to sit on the throne of the house of Israel. That's Jesus. Yet the screen part. Wait a minute. The Levitical priest shall never lack a man in my presence to offer burnt offerings, to burn grain offerings, and to make sacrifices forever.
Hmm.
How long's forever? Whatever you do with that word forever, make sure you do the same thing to John 3:16 to the word everlasting. Because if we talked about this the first episode, if God breaks his promises to them and forever doesn't mean forever to them, then everlasting life doesn't mean everlasting life to us either. You can't trust a God like that.
Can't have double standards.
Can't.
Yeah. All right, I think it's a great time to wrap it up, guys. Thank you guys, everybody, for watching this episode. If you please consider to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks so much.